every bracha that we make is really comprised of three integral parts. There's the Baruch Ata Asher Kedishanu b'Mitzvah v'Tzivanu, and whichever mitzvah it is, or if it's a Birchas Hanen, if it's a bracha on something, it's Baruch Ata She'akol Mi'ah B'Dvarei, or Baruch Ata B'Ri Priya Eitz. That we're benching Hashem for what He did. He gave us a mitzvah. He gave us an opportunity to do this and this mitzvah. He gave us some kind of a fruit, some kind of a whatever the Eibishter gave us. That we're benching Hashem for that. That's one part of the bracha. And besides that, there's another two parts to every bracha. There's the Haskaras Hashem. We say Hashem Elokeinu. We say the Hashem's name. We are recognizing the Hashem's name and saying Hashem's name. Obviously, this is defining HaKadosh Baruch Hu and saying what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to us and the world. And then there's Melech Haolam. And Melech Haolam is where we're recognizing the Melucha, we're recognizing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu rules over the world, and we're accepting His rule. Now, which part? If one is missing, what is it a problem? Is it a ma'akev? So that's a Machlokes in the Gemara. It's a Machlokes in the Gemara in Brachos Daf Mem. Everybody agrees that the Baruch is ma'akev, and Haskaras Hashem is ma'akev. In other words, you have to bench Hashem and you have to mention Hashem's name. That's for sure. It's ma'akev. That if you don't do those two things, you have to do the bracha again. And it's a Machlokes, Reb Yochanan and Rav and Reb Yochanan. If it's a problem, if somebody forgot to say, or he skipped it, he said it in a different language, he said it in Aramaic, if he did not say Melech Haolam. So, and the Gemara wants to bring a raya from a Brachah and a Mishnah and a Drasha that we have in Parshas Ki Savo. In Parshas Ki Savo, by Vida and Maisa, at the end of 3 years, when a person says Vida and Maisa, he tells HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he did everything. He took care of all his maasros, and he got rid of all his maasros that were lingering in the house. So it's Perek Chavav Pasuk Yud Gimel. He says, and the end of the pasuk, he says, I did everything. So over there in the V'lo shachachti, Rashi and the Mishnah Maasar Sheini and the Sifri, they all darshan. They all explain this pasuk to be going on the bracha that somebody makes when b'shas hafrashas ma'aser, when he takes off his maasros, he's doing a mitzvah, and so while he's doing that mitzvah, he obviously makes a bracha. He makes a baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kedishanu b'mitzvah v'tzivanu lahafresh T'rumos Maasros, or whatever, or lahafresh T'rumos Maasros, and that bracha. And so he's telling HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'shas this videi ma'aser, he's telling HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he didn't even, not only did he do his hafrashas ma'aser, not only did he give it to the kohen, not only did he give it to the Levi, but he even said the bracha, he did it right, he did it correctly, he didn't do any tumah, and he also even made the bracha b'shas the hafrasha. Now, obviously, we paskin, and obviously there's a Yerushalmi that says not so, but Bavli in the Bavli in the Gemara in Brachos, we hold that mitzvahs are d'Rabbanan. So anything that mentions mitzvahs over here in this pasuk is not Ber'reisah, it's only an asmachta. It's only the pasuk, the pshat in the pasuk and the chiyuv of the pasuk. What the pasuk is requiring from us is that we should do hafrashas ma'aser correctly. But Chazal darshan in this pasuk that the concept of brachos, an esmachta, a drasha. However, from the way the Mishnah or the Brachah brings down this drasha, the Gemara in Brachos Daf Mem that's discussing the Machlokes Reb Yochanan and Rav asks a kasha on Reb Yochanan. From the way it's presented, the drasha, even though it's not being learned out from the pasuk, it's not being learned out from the shכחתי because it's only an asmachta. But what the Mishnah or the Brachah mentions and omits, we can understand what the Mishnah and Brachah are assuming is required and is needed, and what is not needed. And I would like to show that there seems to be two gersois in the Gemara and Daf Mem Beis. There's either one gersa, the ROSH, seems to have the kasha coming from a Mishnah, from the Mishnah Maasar Sheini, Perek Hey, Mishnah Yud Aleph, which learns out from the Pasuk of Shechachti Brachah. And Tosfes seems to learn that the Gemara's kasha is from a Brachah. We don't know where that Brachah is. It's not the Brachah that Rashi brings down. It's not the Sefri. It's not the Mishnah. Some Brachah that's slightly different. And the teretz that the Gemara gives, the ROSH has one girsa, and that's the girsa that was put into our Gemara by the Marshal. And Tosfes seems to have a different girsa. And I just want to show that the kasha and teretz that the ROSH gives are unique for asking the kasha from the Mishnah, and the teretz that the Tosfes is going to learn is unique for Tosfes' kasha. In other words, since the ROSH asked the kasha from the Mishnah, that's why he had to change the girsa. He has to say that Reb Yochanan is going to change the girsa, and Tosfes learns that the Gemara's kasha is from the Brachah. He says clearly, and therefore he has a different teretz. What's the Gemara? The Gemara asks the kasha. So our girsa in our Gemara Daf Mem basis is like this. In fact, Abaye says, Abaye kavose de Rav mistaber. Like Rav, and not like Reb Yochanan's mistaber, that it's good enough to just say bracha and haskaras shem, and you don't have to mention every single time you do a bracha. You don't have to mention Melech Haolam, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu rules over the world, to be yoytze the bracha, and you don't have to do over a bracha if you miss the Melech Haolam like Rav. And Abaye says that kavos the Rav mistaber. Why? The Tanya le'avarti mi Mitzvah v'lo shechachti. So this Ber'reisah doesn't just learn it out like Rashi tells us in Chumash from the last word in the Pasuk of v'lo shechachti. It goes back to the words before. Le'avarti mi Mitzvah v'lo shechachti. So it says le'avarti mi Mitzvah v'lo shechachti. Le'avarti mi levarechecha v'lo shechachti mi lehaskir shimcha. So le'avati milavarecha is just a bracha, and v'leishachachti milhaski shimcha olav is just haskar shem, but it doesn't mention anything about Malchus. So from there, Abaye says is mistaber like Reb Yochanan. From the fact that the Gemara only this Brachah, we don't know where this Brachah is. This Brachah only mentions these two concepts, and it doesn't mention the third requirement, which is Melech Haolam. Now the obvious problem is that why the Gemara ask from a Brachah, from this Brachah of Le'avaytim Zezech V'Leishachachti, why don't we ask from it's a Mefurish Mishnah Maasar Sheini, which Rashi brings down in Chumash, and it's a Sefri too, that says Mishnah Perek Mishnah Yud Aleph v'lo shechachti milavarechecha u'melahaskir shimcha olav. So there again, it's clear. It's lo shechachti milavarecha. I didn't forget to bench HaKadosh Baruch Hu during Gafrosh's Meiser, and I didn't forget to be maskir shame to mention Hashem's name, and it doesn't say anything about Melucha. So And first of all, obviously, if the Gemara has a choice to ask on Reb Yochanan from a Brachah or to ask from a Mefurish Mishnah, obviously the Gemara should ask from a Mefurish Mishnah. Mefurish Mishnah is much harder, is much more established, and it's a bigger kasha on Reb Yochanan. That's first of all. But more than that. The truth is that the kasha that the Gemara asks on the Brachah is not as strong as the kasha that the Gemara asks on the Mishnah. Why? Because what's the kasha? Because the kasha that the Gemara asks from the Brachah, the Brachah didn't mention anything about Melucha. Okay. So you didn't mention anything about Melucha. You mentioned two things. Somebody b'shas vidu ma'isa. He's saying that he did everything as it was supposed to, and he even mentions that he did the Brachah and he was Maasar Sheini. Fine. But Tosfes says that what's Reb Yochanan going to do with this kasha? Tosfes is not goyris the Gemara, and Tosfes says that the truth is Reb Yochanan is not very bothered by the kasha. Why is he not bothered by the kasha? And the reason that Tosfes says Reb Yochanan is not so bothered by the kasha, that teretz you can't say if you would have had you asked it from the Mishnah. What does Tosfes say? You can't ask. Reb Yochanan is not so bothered by the kasha. Why? Because he mentioned two things. He didn't mention another ones. Atu ki rochla kol ki hari limni v'lezel. Is he like a peddler? He has to mention every single thing he did. So he didn't mention lo yavatim lo shechachti. I didn't forget to make a bracha. I didn't even forget to be Maasar Sheini. Fine. But in the Mishnah, I don't think you could say that. Because in the Mishnah it says lo yavarti mitzesecha, we dashing for something else. V'lo shechachti milavarechecha u'milahaskishimcha alav. So in the v'lo shechachti, we're in the one word v'lo shechachti, we're not just darshaning bracha, we're darshaning 2 out of 3 of the requirements. In other words, like this: if there's 2 words in the pasuk that we're darshaning, le'avarti mitzesecha, we're going is talking about bracha, and v'lo shechachti is talking about haskar Hashem. Fine. So each one is one, and each one gets one, and that's not an omission if we didn't mention every single thing. If the Brachah didn't mention all the things that he's saying that he did. But in the Mishnah, v'lo shechachti is only listing 2 out of 3. Maishaya the Haishaya. If in the Mishnah where it says v'lo shechachti, I'm saying v'lo shechachti milavarecha milahaskishimcha alav. So in other words, I didn't forget to do 2 out of 3 things. That's an obvious omission. I forgot that I didn't mention the melucha. I only mentioned bracha, and I only mentioned haskar Hashem, and I'm not the Mishnah is clearly missing something. The Mishnah is clearly not mentioning something. So that's an obvious kasha on Reb Yochanan. So in other words, the kasha, the kasha, why the Gemara is asking from the Brachah is twofold. Not only because Mishnayos are better than Mishnah, than Brachah, but also because the kasha on the Brachah is not nearly as strong as the kasha on the Mishnah. The kasha on the Brachah is, like as Tosfes says, is easy to get around, is easy to get away with. You can just say that the Brachah didn't have to mention every single thing. However, the kasha from the Mishnah, since the Mishnah is darshaning everything from one word, and from one word we mentioned 2 out of 3. It's a much stronger kasha. You can't just have 2 and not 3. So I want to say that ain't a Tosfes Taka, if you look at Tosfes understands the kasha as a kasha from the Brachah, and that's why Tosfes says the teretz. The Gemara didn't even bother answering the teretz, and the teretz is atu ki rochla. It's a kasha that like Reb Yochanan, it's a little bit more mustaber. It's like Reb Yochanan, it would have been a little bit more mustaber had the Brachah mentioned all the things that were needed, but it's not a major kasha. The Gemara doesn't even answer it. And Tosfos mentions that the Reb Yochanan lekasha loitani datu ki rochla. But the ROSH the ROSH that learns the kasha from the Mishnah. If you look at the ROSH clearly says that the Gemara's kasha is from the Nan, and the kasha is from the Mishnah. So like the ROSH that the kasha is from the Mishnah. The ROSH has to say that the teretz is Rabbi Yochanan Nama Tani milvarechecha umilahaskeshimcha umalchuscha alav. So the ROSH that's learning that the kasha is from the Mishnah that already mentioned 2 out of 3 into one word of lo shechachti, that Mishnah has to be changed by Reb Yochanan, and we have to say that we have to stick into lo shechachti all 3. It's a little bit misleading because in the beginning of the Mishnah, the ROSH brings down the Mishnah a little bit different, but he clearly says that Nan, and he clearly says that Rabbi Yochanan Amatni Milvrecho Milahaskeshimcha Malchuscha Olav. And the Madani Yontif Taka says that changing the girsa of the Tani is only the ROSH's girsa, but Tosfes clearly says that it's not the teretz, because Tosfes is learning that the kasha was from the Brachah, from the Brachah that we're learning out Brachah and Askar Shem from 2 different words. So therefore, it's not the omission of Malchus is not so stark, and it's not so stark. You could just say Atu Ki Ruchla, as Tosfes says, and Reb Yochanan doesn't even bother with that kasha. But the ROSH that learned that the kasha is from the Mishnah, and if the kasha is from the Mishnah, there is no 8, so you have to change the girsa, and that's the ROSH says clearly Tani milvarecho milhaskeshimcha umalchuscha olav, and that's the girsa that in our Gemara is put in. The Marshal put it in. The Madani Yontif says that the Marshal put it into our Gemara. He put it in the Tani, into our Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan Tani for the shechachti. But that was the Marshal put into our Gemara from the ROSH, a little bit different than our ROSH says it. But because the ROSH needed it. Why did the ROSH need it? Because the ROSH is learning from the Mishnah. And just one last thing, the Achronim want to know how come Tosfes didn't like the girsa that like Tosfes says in our Gemara seems to have that the kasha is not from the Mishnah, the kasha is from the Ber'reisah. Why did we ask it from the Ber'reisah, not from the Mishnah? So I'm just saying, now that we see from the ROSH that the kasha from the Mishnah is so strong that the only way is to change the girsa, and Rabbi Yochanan did change and the teretz says that Rabbi Yochanan did change the girsa, so maybe in Tosfos' girsa, it was clear from Abaye that Rabbi Yochanan was changing the girsa, because you can't get away from that Mishnah. That was before the Gemara. It was obvious that Rabbi Yochanan, if he's saying that you need Malchus, you need Melech Haolam, that's obvious that Rabbi Yochanan is changing the girsa in the Mishnah in Maasar Sheini, like the ROSH says the Gemara's teretz is over here, and the only question is this Brachah could get away without changing the girsa, and that's the question if it's more mistaber or not mistaber. But the ROSH that learns that the Gemara's kasha is from the Mishnah, the conversation is goofy from this Mishnah over here. If what the gersa is the gersa to milvarecha u'milaskeshimcha, or it's milvarecha u'milaskeshimcha u'malchuscha alecha.